Does a man have a right to burn a Koran?
Does a woman have a right to wear a burqa?
We'll be discussing all of this with Nick Timothy, the Tory MP taking on Islamic extremists.
We shouldn't have these organisations anywhere near our national and public life, but they are. And you know, then there's another layer to it, which is, you know, we have 4 Islamist members of Parliament now. We may have more in the future.
Nick Timothy, the Tory MP for West Suffolk, formerly of this parish, because you were a columnist for us and you still do write occasionally for the Telegraph.
That's true. Yep.
Lovely to see you. Now, you're making quite a large intervention in the House of Commons about blasphemy laws being introduced by the back door. What are your concerns and what are you proposing to deal with it?
Well, Parliament actually abolished blasphemy laws in 2008, and we haven't actually prosecuted any blasphemy cases for decades anyway. But what's happening increasingly is that the Public Order Act is being used to effectively create a new backdoor blasphemy law. We've seen a couple of cases recently where people have desecrated a Koran and criticised Islam, and they've been prosecuted under the Act because the Act says that you're not allowed to use abusive or threatening language or behaviour to cause people alarm, harassment and distress.
But we don't really want... We had this debate about the Koran burning, and we both said to ourselves, didn't we, the act of burning a Koran isn't a crime in itself. The act of burning any book, and indeed even a flag, isn't a crime in itself. Wasn't the problem in that particular case the fact that he had done it outside a Turkish embassy where he was voicing criticism of Islam as a religion?
Yes, and the fact that he was outside the Turkish embassy, I don't think is either here or there, because I mean, it's not like he was standing outside a mosque and being incredibly provocative in that kind of way. But the perverse thing about using the Public Order Act in this way is it effectively says the protester, the person using the language, is accountable for the reactions of other people who respond violently to criticism of their beliefs. And I think that's wrong, because if you do that, you are killing free speech.
Out of interest, if someone turned up outside a church or an embassy and burned a Bible and was spouting anti-Christian rhetoric whilst burning a Bible, is that okay? Would we say, well, that's free speech, that's okay for them to do that?
Obviously, it wouldn't be nice, and it's not nice to burn a Koran either. But I think this is actually my point, which is if somebody does mock Jesus, or if they were to do something unpleasant with a Bible, the reaction of others isn't to threaten violence and disorder, and therefore the person doing it would not be prosecuted in this way, because that's the logic of using the Public Order Act in this way.
Isn't the problem as well? So is it this specific case of Hamit Coskun, who is obviously being very brave, he's being very vocal in his condemnation of what he regards to be Islamic extremism, basically. And the response to the Quran burning has been, well, violent and visceral. He's now in hiding. He's in a safe house. We talked to our chief reporter, Robert Mendick, about the case last week. He's gone to visit him there, interviewed him there, and now he's facing death threats. So is this another example? Are you saying then, Nick Timothy, that this man's right to live his life while being critical, as he has been, of a religion and it, arguably perhaps even its peoples or some of its peoples, that should trump any other concern if it resulted in him now fearing for his life?
Well, yeah, I don't think anybody should live in fear of their lives for expressing sincerely held opinions. What we're talking about is a group of people, a minority of people. I'm not suggesting all Muslims have this kind of attitude. A minority of people seeking to impose their values and expectations of respect for their values on everybody else. And that's not what a free society is about. That's not what pluralism is. And it's not what Parliament has ever said should be okay. As I say, Parliament repealed blasphemy laws many years ago.
But do you think this is something uniquely that some members of the Muslim community are doing? I just use the other example. Obviously, there are protests sometimes by Christian fundamentalists, if you can call them that, outside abortion clinics and all the rest of it. Are we saying we're in the situation now, which is why you've had to raise this and try and make a legislative intervention, because there is something unique about some people in the Muslim community who are trying to specifically shut down criticism of Islam compared to people in other religious communities?
Well, I think, firstly, the law itself is blind in the way that it's written, and I'm sure judges would behave in a way that that treated adherents of different religions in the same way. Equally, we should be honest that since 1988 at least, and the publication of the Satanic Verses, the public conversations that exists in this country and in other Western countries about Islam is, I think, limited by fear of consequences if people say the wrong things. Now, Salman Rushdie lived in hiding for years. He was actually attacked a couple of years ago in America. We have the Batley teacher who showed a depiction of Muhammad during a lesson about blasphemy at school, and he remains in hiding with his family. We've had other incidents, such as the case of the boys in Wakefield who scuffed a Koran at school and were suspended from school, and the mother of one of the boys had to sit through a kind of show trial in the local mosque with the police attending. Now, we can't pretend that the authorities, the state, is behaving like this because these people, the people who work and run these organisations, think that we should have a blasphemy law. They're doing it out of a sense of fear of the consequences. But that's wrong, because if you give in to the mob, they're not going to stop there. They'll continue to push and push, and it's up to us, I think, if we want to defend the reality of a free society, to hold the line and to say no, this is not okay.
Can we talk about something that's very closely related to this, which is the idea of a burqa ban, which has obviously come up last week. It caused a huge row, particularly within Reform, when they asked the Prime Minister whether he would be in favour of a burqa ban. Wearing a burqa or not wearing a burqa is largely connected to freedom of expression and free will. You've, I think, said in the past you'd be in favour of banning burqas, haven't you? Is that
Yep.
still your view?
Yeah, I've actually written about this in the Telegraph. I've had this view for a number of years, and obviously it's difficult if you do live in a free society to say there should be restrictions on certain things. But I've never been an absolutist about freedom, and even when we're talking about free speech in the context of the Public Order Act, I would still say things like clear incitement should be illegal. So we shouldn't be absolutist about some of these things. The reason I have an issue with the burqa is, apart from the fact that I think it's oppressive to women, and I remember a conversation with a Muslim female friend of mine who said, you should be unafraid about saying this, because it is like watching women walk around the streets manacled. She felt that strongly about it, and she said, you shouldn't hold back from saying this. So I think it's a problem for women, but it's undoubtedly, I think, a social problem for everybody. Right? There are consequences to our actions, whatever we do. And I think if you live in a community where it becomes normal for a significant number of people to cover their face, that inevitably is going to undermine social trust. And I don't want to live in a society like that. And I actually think most people would say the same.
We've heard from Kemi Badenoch, your party leader, suggesting that she would like to see burqas and any other face covering banned from the workplace. And I think she's also including things like balaclavas, although I don't know about you, I haven't seen many people in balaclavas walking into workplaces.
No, but one of the things that struck me while Nick was talking there in terms of enforcing this is, if you did ban burqas, well, what happens if somebody then decides to walk around in a Spider-Man mask all day? Do you then tell them that you're going to arrest them for that?
Well, maybe any face covering beyond a medical face covering post-COVID is a problem. It was interesting, Nick, because we did ask the Telegraph audience what they thought of a workplace burqa ban. 116,000 people voted. 82% for it, 18 against. Let's just read a couple of the readers' comments here because it is quite interesting. Peter Kelly. It's not just about security, it's also about the status of women in Western society. No woman in Britain should be made to cover her head with only her eyes visible. Ben Barker, however, says it should not be up to employers to ban the burqa. This is a responsibility of government. Just to put the alternative view, because I'm in a difficult space on this. On one hand, I'd always fight for women to wear what they like. We're assuming that women who wear the burqa are forced to do so by men. I'm not sure whether that's always the case.
I don't think all of them are. That's the thing that I think is difficult about this, that you'd almost have to stop each person and say to them, have you been forced to wear this, or are you wearing it because
that's
you
not the only
want
question,
to
is
and you find
it?
it liberating? I don't know.
Because I don't think the moral question is just about individual rights. It's about what it does to us as a society.
Social cohesion.
Yeah.
Can I ask a supplementary question just with you in mind as Theresa May's former right-hand man? You worked with the former Prime Minister both at the Home Office and then in Downing Street. Is there an argument to be said, and I know you're being very vocal on the issue of Islamic extremism, and actually you've always been consistent in that position. Is there an argument to say that the genie is now out of the bottle on this? If we look back and we've now got calls, for instance, to prescribe the Muslim Brotherhood, David Cameron considered that back in the day, abandoned it. Theresa May, as Home Secretary, could have arguably done more on Islamic extremism. What happened? How is this? Have we now got to a situation where we're sort of talking about burqa bans? Because Tim Stanley, our colleague, wrote a good piece today on this and just said, well, it's a bit late to be discussing it now. Other states have been well ahead of the UK when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, and I think the fact that that some states have been show that actually it can be done. Now, I'd have liked to do some of these things much earlier, but they weren't. So we can only deal with things as they are. The Muslim Brotherhood is a completely insidious organisation. There was actually a report published by the French government a few weeks ago about the activity of the Muslim Brotherhood there, which I think reached very similar conclusions to the report commissioned by the British government about 10 years ago. And lots of organisations that are considered mainstream and with whom the state engages and lends legitimacy and so on. And the media will have people on talking about what it's like to be a Muslim in Britain or to express the views of the Muslim population. Lots of these people are actually connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think we, for a number of years now, have grown used to the threat of Islamist violence and terrorism, and people are aware of that risk. The security and intelligence agencies cope as best they can and do a good job. The state has got a bit more, I think, realistic about needing to tackle the ideology that lies behind it. But actually, if you look at the Muslim Brotherhood and the organisations connected to it, they may not be interested in terrorism. They're trying to achieve their goals through entryism and by basically playing the liberal democratic game, by creating all of these organisations that act as representative groups, that take part in consultations, that go on the TV and advance arguments. It's subtle, but it is quite effective.
Do you agree the Tories have been asleep at the wheel on this?
Look, I think there was a certain amount of progress in terms of confronting things like the ideology behind these things. I mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood review that David Cameron launched, which I think was actually very informative in terms of exposing what some of these organisations were.
I know, but nothing happened.
But, yes, exactly. But you can't deny that we've basically gone further down the road towards something that I think, I worry about a lot. We shouldn't have these organisations anywhere near our national and public life, but they are, and then there's another layer to it, which is we have 4 Islamist members of Parliament now. We may have more in the future. And this is something that we need to really grapple with, because I don't think having political Islam in and around our government is anything anybody in this country should really want.
Nick Timothy, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Daily Tea.
Thanks for having me.